Last night, I mean, just another laugher whatsoever. I mean, in every way, shape, or form. I mean, I couldn't have been more wrong about Milwaukee taking a step forward, shooting the basketball a lot better last night in game two of their series against the Brooklyn Nets. They did not. I mean, the game was over in the second quarter. At one point in time, the Brooklyn Nets are leading the game by 50 or more points. I mean, they win the game by 39. I mean, any way you cut it, Milwaukee, the Nets shoot 50% from three, 52% from the floor. They had 8 less turnovers. They, were within a workable margin they had more offensive rebounds than the Milwaukee Bucks. They were within 2 on the rebound total for the entire game. They took 10 more shots than Milwaukee. No James Harden, no problem. And you get to Budenholzer and the Milwaukee Bucks, all those that were telling us and telling you and I that beware of Milwaukee, this is going to be different this playoffs. Well, they dispatched the Miami Heat very, very easily. But the Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, have gotten absolutely exposed. I mean, who actually thinks that this is ever going to be a series? I'd like to talk to that individual, him or her. I mean, could you ever envision the Milwaukee Bucks actually taking 4 of the next 5 games after what we witnessed, whether it be Saturday night or whether it be last night? Game 3 is going to be Thursday, as you just heard Recco mention. They go on the road in Milwaukee. What exactly is going to change this series? I mean, stop the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. I mean, who the hell is stopping the Brooklyn Nets right now?
Well, listen, KD looks like he's the best player left in the playoffs. And I have to imagine, if you are another NBA player and you're watching that game last night, you have to feel like already doomed and defeated just because of what Brooklyn, just how good they look, as you said, without James Harden on the floor. I mean, we're not talking about some cupcake here. We can talk about the Bucks and Mike Budenholzer not making adjustments. I mean, this was a top 10 defensive team in the league that's got a 2-time MVP as their centerpiece. They went out and made a huge move for Drew Holiday. They have Chris Middleton. I mean, these guys are just basically, Middleton's kind of disappeared here, which is crazy to think. But, like, what do you do if you're the rest of the NBA? Honestly, like, the super teams just keep getting ratcheted up to a place where, like, I don't know where it goes next. All I know is that the Brooklyn Nets are going to make it seem even more like the haves and the have-nots in the NBA. And then there's, like, another level of the super team have and have-nots. Like, we're getting into tiers of super teams, Moose. I mean, this feels like we're even far away from, like, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. That feels quaint at this point because you have Durant and KD KD, Durant the same. You have KD, Kyrie, and Harden, and you don't even need Harden. Like, you don't even need the third guy. This is how good this super team is, or this is how good they've looked in these first 2 games. Like, I'm curious to know where this goes, because if you're a young superstar in this league, right, or you're just a straight up superstar, you haven't won a title yet. You are a Dame Lillard. You are a Donovan Mitchell. You are one of the Tatum and Brown, in Boston. You're one of the guys in Philly. You haven't won a title yet. Now you're looking at the Brooklyn Nets like, what the hell are you supposed to do with that? How are you supposed to compete with that? And, I hate to, like, make it about the Knicks, but I kind of couldn't help but start thinking about the Knicks as I'm watching them last night. Because superstar is the baseline of what you need in this league to even be a somewhat contender. Superstar, and then add another. And then you actually have to add another. Moose, it's getting nuts here, and I feel like the Nets have just taken it to a totally different level about where the super team has to be,
Yeah, I mean, it's also a criticism of Milwaukee. I mean, Budenholzer is going to quickly get disposed of after the series comes to an end. I mean, he is the lack of adjustments. I mean, the idea of going to a zone defense last night after the Nets were 8 of 16 from behind the floor, behind the arc, made little to no sense whatsoever. The team is swallowing their own tongue. I mean, that's what you're watching with this Milwaukee Buck team. I mean, it's not even a matter of when Giannis is on the court or when he's not on the court. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets outscored the Milwaukee Bucks when Giannis was on the court last night by 22. I mean, so that's not even a factor, which was a factor on Saturday night. I mean, yes, the Brooklyn Nets have taken it to another level. Yes, they look like an unstoppable offensive machine. Yes, it's about sharing the basketball, as Kyrie Irving talked about after the game last night. Yes, they're playing their best offensive basketball right now, but also, I mean, how bad can you possibly be if you're Milwaukee? I mean, and this is a team that made adjustments. I mean, they went out there and added Holiday. They went out there and added PJ Tucker. You mentioned Chris Middleton, who's been an absolute zero. I mean, he was on the court. The Nets outscored him by 30 when Middleton Middleton was on the court last night. I mean, it is embarrassing when you look at Milwaukee. All I heard about that this was a different Milwaukee team, that this was going to be, if this is really the NBA Finals and this is the toughest test the Nets are going to face the rest of the way, whether it be the Eastern Conference Finals, if it's the Hawks or the Philadelphia 76ers or whoever the hell comes out of the West, I mean, God bless. I mean, why even play it? The games are unwatchable. I mean, it just, you sit there, and if you're a Net fan, if you're Evan Roberts, Baseglio, all these Net fans out there, Billy G, all these guys that are out there that are huge Net fans, yes, you take it in, you eat it, you love every single second of it. The game was non-competitive. I mean, Milwaukee, why even show up on the court if you're going to go out there and give you that kind of performance? There is little to no defense whatsoever from Milwaukee. What the hell is Budenholzer doing from the time the Miami Heat series ended to getting ready to take on the Brooklyn Nets, because we all knew it was going to be the Brooklyn Nets? This is it? I mean, these first two games from Milwaukee, this is the best shot that you could give the Brooklyn Nets after you have a bad shooting performance on Saturday night. You follow that up last night where you shoot under 30% from three, and that game is an absolute laugher in the second quarter. That's the stiffest test of the Brooklyn Nets. Now, it's more about Brooklyn than anything else. They're great. I mean, no one's denying it. I mean, who the hell is stopping the Brooklyn Nets right now? And this is without James Harden on the court, without a healthy James Harden, and look how unstoppable they look offensively. So, yes, it's an ode to Brooklyn, but I mean, in Milwaukee, do you have any belief that Budenholzer, that genius, is going to make any sort of an adjustment here to make anything of this series of note, of interest whatsoever? I mean, who right now would think that Game 3 on Thursday night doesn't end up being the same thing that we saw in the first two games of this series? I mean, because they play no defense whatsoever, Maggie.
Well, and they were a top 10 defensive team during the regular season,
oh
so that is
God.
not something that you would have seen coming into this series. And what's interesting about Brooklyn, I'll commend them because, there have been a lot of times where Brooklyn has jumped out to some pretty big leads in the regular season. But you know what happened? They would let the other team back in, and inevitably you'd get like a pretty, you'd get some crunch time, and it'd be a little bit tense at the end of the game. I mean, that hasn't happened here at all. You're talking about 19 points, 49 points, and they never look back. They never let them in. It kind of goes to show that Brooklyn actually does have another gear defensively, something that we asked Steve Nash about. They've shown that they do have it. It's a combination of that and obviously Milwaukee being ice cold in terms of shooting. It's been hard to watch, but we talk about awards, and we're going to talk about Thibodeau and him getting Coach of the Year. Fantastic, well-deserved. Julius Randle, most improved, all that. I mean, Sean Marks for Executive of the Year. He will not get the award most likely because of how the Harden trade went down, and I don't know if they want to, we've talked about this with Harden, as a potential MVP candidate before he hurt the hamstring, and about that. People will say, well, Harden basically, gave kind of like a, Miami 76ers or Brooklyn, and I commend Brooklyn for going all the way in, even though they don't need him right now, and he's still on the mend, but they are going to need him at some point. But it's beyond that. I mean, look at the other guys on this team, and look at how they've been able to step up. And it's not just Joe Harris, but that he certainly deserves credit for that and giving him a big contract. You're obviously looking at Blake Griffin, who was totally left for dead, who's been absolutely amazing in this series. He's diving on the floor for loose balls, dunking, hitting threes. I mean, defending Giannis, doing everything that you could ask for and more. You're talking about Nick Claxton. You're talking about Mike James. You're talking about Shamet. You're talking about, Bruce Brown. This is a great basketball team, even outside of the big three. And so, just all the credit in the world to them, because I don't even know if it necessarily matters. If Milwaukee makes a tweak here, a tweak there, we've already saw in game one, you can let Giannis get everything, and as long as you can shut down the other guys, they're not going to be able to do anything. And so, yeah, this is just amazing, but I can't get it out of my head about what this means for the NBA, and honestly what it means for the Knicks. You have a team that's just got all the tools. It's got all the tools to make it happen in terms of adding premier talent. You've had this massive step forward in a year after you go 21-45 to win 41 games the next year and take this leap, right? New front office, new identity, new everything, new positivity around the Garden. You can sell the Garden now as an actual positive thing for a superstar to want to come here. You can sell the pressure of the fan base. Look, it is a pressure to win in the Garden, but you know what you can sell now? Your legacy. Look at what and how much the Knicks matter when you have this historical super team going on in Brooklyn, and how the Knicks still mattered so much in this city, now you can sell that as legacy. Hey, come here, help us win a title for the first time in 50 years.
But you could have sold it, but now you look at it's been more stable. I mean,
of
now
course,
it's Rose
in 1 year.
Worldwide West, and it's Thibodeau. I mean, but they're not nobody's putting together a team in the next year that's going to compete with this team.
Okay, but hold on. So if I'm a superstar in this league and I have yet to win a title, why would I not be trying to stake out my ground? I'm getting together with my people. Who's that one other person? I'm saying, if I was Dame Lillard, if I'm Kawhi Leonard, this is what I'm trying to figure out. Like, Kawhi Leonard did an amazing thing. He went and won a championship with the Toronto Raptors, basically as a mercenary. How much more does that mean if he had done that with a team like the Knicks? A team where the media market size, the history of the organization, both good and bad.
He's the patron saint of Canada basketball right now.
And would you rather be the patron saint of New York City? No offense, Canada.
I mean, people I talk to, he's not leaving Los Angeles. I mean,
I'm just saying.
Look at Kawhi. I understand, but Maggie, I think it's going to be a fool's errand if you try and chase this group. I mean, I do. I mean, this is not going to last.
What other
forever.
option do you have if you want to win? You got to be a super team.
Well, this is not. I mean, it's not doable. I mean, it really isn't. You're looking at 3 of the top 10 players in the sport, top 12
you got to
players
take your shot
in the entire sport. Yeah, I just don't. I think you're looking at a year and a half of this group staying together. So
it might not be right away.
Right. Well, that's the point. So you look at Brooklyn right now, and who knows how the rest of the playoffs go. Milwaukee shows you little to no heart whatsoever. Maybe the Atlanta Hawks or the Philadelphia 76ers will be I mean, the Boston Celtics showed themselves to be a stiffer test than the Milwaukee Bucks here through the first 2 games of this series. But yeah, I mean, I mean, of course, you need 2 superstars and 3 in order to win an NBA title. That, whether the Brooklyn Nets win a championship or the way that they destroy the Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, is that really the eye-opening experience? Or, I mean, we kind of knew that already, no? I mean, we talked about the Julius Randle being that secondary guy. You need that, Dame Lillard type to step in. And then you're probably going to need another guy to either develop, or you're going to need another guy to add into that group as well to look at winning an NBA title. So this is the starting process for the New York Knicks. I mean, if you're saying, okay, well, I need to put together a team in the here and now that's going to compete with Brooklyn, I mean, you're going to crash and burn. It's just not going to happen because you're not going to be able, in short order, be able to put the talent that they have on the court together with Kyrie, with Kevin Durant, and when James Harden, when all 3 are healthy. And as we've seen in the first 2 games of the series, they don't even need all 3 to healthy to be dominant.
No, but and trying to match what these 3, and what this represents, you're right. It could be impossible for anyone to replicate. But in a way, it kind of feels like the only blueprint that's out there if you really want to get yourself to title contender. And that might not happen this offseason. But if I'm the Knicks, I have to be going so hard. My plan A has to be going so hard after Lillard or Kawhi, because you don't even have one. You need to get one just to start this. And you have, not only is there going to be just a touch more urgency because of the success they had last year, but you have the tools. Like, you have the cap space and you have the draft picks. You don't have assets. You've got cap space and draft picks. I'm sorry. Like, no offense to RJ Barrett, Quickly, Knox, Obi Toppin. You don't really have the assets, but you have the cap space and you do have the draft picks. So you have the tools, actually, if a move is there to be made. And I think that has to be the plan A for the Knicks. Go hard after whether it's going to be Lillard, whether it's going to be Kawhi, whether it's going to be Donovan Mitchell if he wants to leave Utah. One of those guys who wants to get out of their situation. Kawhi's a free agent, so it's a little different. But one of those guys, and that has to be your plan A. If it doesn't work out, okay, maybe you regroup. You don't want to, force yourself into a bad contract. You don't want to back yourself and talk yourself into something. But, you're watching what the Brooklyn Nets are doing, and I look at the Knicks and say, man, this is a blank canvas here for superstars to team up and come to New York. It feels even different than it did in July of 2019 when Durant and Kyrie decided to go to Brooklyn. This is the perfect ground for somebody, multiple guys, to say, we want to play together and we're going to come in and stake our claim here. And that's and on the flip side, if I'm an NBA superstar and I'm looking for a place to go and I'm looking for a legacy move and I'm looking for a championship, to try to lay the groundwork, and I'm trying to carve out my own thing. I don't want to join the Nets. I don't want to join the Lakers. New York is like the destination right now, and I just don't want to see the Knicks see that pass them by.
Well, I don't think it's going to pass them by, but I also think they have to be patient. But what the Nets have is, honestly, historical. That's it. So when you look at it might be the greatest collection of 3 offensive players that the sport has ever seen. So the foundation, even, and when you look at the Knicks, if you want to say, all right, well, the Knicks are now attractive, for sure. We've talked about that time and time again. We've had guys and whether it be Scalabrine, others, that Steve Novak, who joined the program, saying that, talking to guys around the league, that the Knicks are an attractive organization right now for the way that they play. That Tom Thibodeau, the emphasis on wins, it's now no longer kind of a sinking ship, that there is light there for the Knicks. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's all there, but that's all the narratives I've heard in the years gone by as well. So I've heard about legacy, being there to bring a title since '73. All of these things that we've heard about the Knicks in the past, and why it would be attractive to LeBron or Dwayne Wade, or name the superstar. And one guy after another decided to say thanks but no thanks. If it's going to take the Brooklyn Nets win an NBA title, I don't know. I think that's kind of a. I don't think the Knicks can look at Brooklyn and say, well, this is what we need to be, because if you're never going to be what they have. That's how good this group is. That's just it. So, nothing ever lasts forever. I know you have to compete, and the Knicks are not going to shy away from competing with the Brooklyn Nets, but I think we have to put into kind of a fair context, because if you're going to say, well, the Knicks need to put a collection that the Brooklyn Nets have, well, you're never going to be able to do that.
No,
I don't care what the names are that you're looking at. You're never going to be able to put Durant, Harden, Kyrie Irving, those caliber of 3, that threesome on the same team at the same time, what Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets have been able to accomplish. And all of the concerns that you had about Brooklyn coming into the postseason, whether it be the narrative about defense, well, the defense has been fine. Whether it be the narrative about them not being able to play together or not having enough time, well, you know what? We saw in the Boston Celtics series that was not an issue. Whether it be about health, well, we're seeing now in the Milwaukee Bucks series that not being an issue whatsoever. We said it before the playoffs started. It was go time for the Brooklyn Nets, and what they've shown you here is, yeah, we're going to flip the switch. Yeah, we're going to light it up. Yeah, we're going to be next to impossible to stop offensively. And the trust that the 3 superstars have in their teammates, that's the thing that hits me the most, is when you look at this group and what Brooklyn, because we can wax poetic about what those 3 stars are individually as offensive talents. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. The trust that they have built up with their teammates like Joe Harris and others to be able to feed them the basketball and hit the open man. It's a beautiful thing to watch. And that's what's so stunning about this performance right now. And they're going to get tested at some point in time. So if you're going to look at this as being a lesson for the Knicks and what they have to accomplish after Thibodeau gets named the NBA Coach of the Year, yeah, they're on the chase, as is every other team in the NBA right now, as is the Los Angeles Lakers, who got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs, and they try and roll it back, and Magic's going out there and criticizing Dennis Schroeder. So for the Knicks, yeah, they're an attractive group. We'll see what the next step is and where they need to go, and what superstar ends up becoming available, and if he indeed wants to come here to New York. But it's going to be a journey. It's not going to be one off season or one summer where you're going to be able to do that. I don't believe. If it happens, that's great. But I have a hard time envisioning that the Knicks are going to be able to put that kind of group together in one off season.
No, but you got to die trying. And what the Knicks do have is they have the tools, and that's what makes them different amongst all the other teams in the NBA. The tools, the market size, and the appeal of New York. And I know people have said the appeal of New York, it's, we've thrown that around for a long time. But you know what? It does actually feel different. Like, this is a positive. And after 12 head coaches in the last 20 years, the fact that Tom Thibodeau just won Coach of the Year and maybe puts an end to that storyline, that's just another sort of box that the Knicks can check, where it's just like, all right, that part over. Front office looks like stable. That part, you get, Steve Mills out, like whatever it was, Isaiah. Hey, we could go on and on, Glenn Grunwald. Like, we can just go through all the rough front offices, and you just you saw it. Like there is this something je ne sais quoi about New York that's actually back because they're no longer the laughing stock. But if I'm an NBA superstar and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, how am I going to carve out my own lane and where am I going to go? Look at what Durant and Kyrie did. I mean, granted, they were both free agents, but at this point with player empowerment and how they're able to maneuver and manipulate where they go, it doesn't really matter. I think if you're a free agent or if you're under contract, it's just how messy do you want it to get. But like they basically handpicked Brooklyn. Like we talk about Kyrie loving the Nets and growing up in New Jersey, and that's all well and good. But they kind of handpicked this place. It was the same with LeBron and D Wade. Remember, this has come out subsequently after 2010. They were ready to come to New York. It was a bad meeting with like Donnie Walsh and then like a Dolan thing, whatever it was, and then Pat Riley putting his rings on the table, and they end up in Miami. That could have easily been New York, and how different would it have been? Like they can't. This is just an opportunity that I see here for the Knicks. That's massive. And then on top of it, watching Brooklyn and thinking about how other superstars are looking at this and saying, if I don't have a super team, I'm nobody. Like, I mean, well, I love the Phoenix Suns. I love the Utah Jazz. I think that's amazing. But watch the Nets. I mean, come on.
Right. They're on a different level, as we've seen with other teams. And they've taken it now to an extreme level offensively of what they've been able to do here in their first two games against Milwaukee.